was making dinner, roasted chicken, steamed vegetables, and mashed potatoes just the way he liked it, when he sat down at the table, took a deep breath, and said, "Beth, I can't do this anymore." And just like that, my life cracked open, like a plate falling from the shelf. My name is Bethany Miller, but everyone calls me Beth. I live in a 2-story colonial house on a quiet street in Maplewood, New Jersey. That house, it used to be my dream. The white paint is chipped now. The wooden fence is leaning in places, but it's home. It's where I raised 2 kids, hosted birthday parties, folded 1,000 loads of laundry, and where my heart finally broke. I still wake up earlier than my alarm. Old habits. I used to get up to pack lunches for the kids and make coffee for Dee, my husband, Tom. Now, I wake up because sleep doesn't feel like rest anymore. It feels like a place where memories chase me down. Tom and I got married when I was 26 and he was 30. We met in a grocery store, of all places. He reached for a jar of pasta sauce I couldn't get to, smiled, and asked if I wanted to grab coffee. 1 cup turned into a lifetime, or so I thought. For about a week, Tom had been coming home late. He said work was crazy. I believed him. I always did. Until that night, dinner was ready. Chicken pot pie, a side salad, and apple cobbler for dessert. His favorites. He sat down at the table, didn't touch his fork. His eyes looked different, distant. I ignored it, tried to anyway. "Beth, I can't do this anymore." "What do you mean?" I asked, trying to sound calm. He exhaled slowly. "I haven't been happy, not for a while." I froze, my stomach twisted. "We can talk about this. Maybe we need a break, or counseling." He shook his head. His voice cracked a little. "It's not you. I fell in love with someone else." That's when I felt everything drop. "Who?" "Her name's Claire. She works at the firm. I never meant for it to happen, but it did." "How long?" 6 months. 6 months. He held my hand on our anniversary dinner while he was already with someone else. That was the part that shattered me. Not the betrayal itself, but how normal everything had seemed. He still kissed my forehead every morning. Still ate my cooking. Still sat next to me at church. And now, he was leaving. The house was quiet. No background TV. No clinking dishes. Just the sound of the wall clock ticking and my heart pounding. Even the warm kitchen lights felt like spotlights exposing me, raw, alone. I walked to the kitchen, turned off the oven, and leaned against the counter. My back to him. "If you walk out that door tonight," I said, voice flat, "don't come back." I didn't recognize the voice coming out of my own mouth. It wasn't the Beth who had giggled on her wedding day. It was someone else. Someone cracked. He stood up. I heard his footsteps moving away. The door opened. A cold breeze slipped in. Then it shut, and I just stood there, in the silence. Until I slid down to the kitchen floor, pulled my knees to my chest, and cried. Not sobbing, not wailing, just quiet, broken tears. The kind you cry when everything you thought was real suddenly isn't. When Tom left, he didn't just take his clothes or his favorite mug or the scent of his cologne from the bathroom sink. He took the rhythm of the house with him. Suddenly, the little sounds that made up our life, the thud of his boots by the door, the way he always cleared his throat before speaking, the late-night shuffle to the fridge, were gone. And the silence that replaced them wasn't peaceful. It was punishing. The next morning, I woke up at 6:12 a.m., just like always. For a few seconds, I forgot. I stretched my legs under the covers and reached across the bed, expecting to feel the warmth of his back, maybe hear him muttering in his sleep. But the sheets were cold, and the other half of the bed still perfectly made. That's when it hit me again. Hard. Like falling all over again. I went downstairs and made coffee out of habit, 2 cups. I even set his mug on the table before realizing he wasn't coming back. That tiny moment, the stupid cup, broke me more than his confession. I didn't call anyone that first week. Not even my sister. What would I even say? Hey, remember Tom? The guy I built my life with? He left. Just like that, for some woman named Claire who apparently laughs at his jokes better than I do. I didn't have the energy for pity, or advice, or those awkward silences when people don't know what to say. So I stayed inside. The days after. The house began to rot in a way I couldn't see, but felt. I stopped cooking. What was the point? I lived on toast and cereal. The laundry piled up. I ignored it. And the mail? It stacked on the hallway table like unopened wounds. Even the dog noticed. Penny, our old golden retriever, started pacing every evening at 6 p.m., her internal clock waiting for the sound of Tom's car in the driveway. But it never came. She would eventually lie by the door, ears perked, eyes half closed, waiting. Just like me. It was Tuesday when my daughter called. Sarah, our firstborn. She lives in Chicago with her husband Ryan and their toddler. Busy life. We don't talk every day, but we're close. She sounded different. Hey, Mom. Dad called me, said. He moved out. I took a breath. He did. Silence. I could hear her trying to choose her next words carefully. He didn't tell me why. Just that you'd explain. I didn't want to explain. I didn't want to say Claire out loud. Saying her name made it real. He's seeing someone else, I said bluntly. And he left. A pause. Then I heard her sniffle. Mom, I'm so sorry. That cracked me. I hadn't cried in days. Not properly. But the sound of my daughter's voice breaking down over the phone. That undid me. I don't know what to do, sweetheart, I whispered. I feel like a ghost. In my own house. Can I come visit? She asked. Just for a weekend? I wanted to say yes. I really did. But I also didn't want her to see me like this. Pathetic. Empty. Unraveled. Not yet, I said. Let me try to stand up. Brute! 3 days later, someone knocked on the door. Not Sarah. Not the neighbors. It was Janet, my best friend from college. We hadn't talked properly in years. Life happened. Kids, jobs, distance. She stood there holding 2 giant paper bags and a look that said, I heard. I came anyway. You didn't think I'd let you sulk alone, did you? She said, barging in like she owned the place. She filled the kitchen with soup smells and soft music. She talked, I listened. And when I finally spoke, it came out all at once. A flood of pain, confusion, guilt, anger. She listened like only someone who's known you for decades can. You gave him your life, Beth, she said gently. And now, it's time to give it back to yourself. It sounded like a line from a movie, but for some reason, it stuck. That night, after she left, I did something I hadn't done in weeks. I opened the windows. The air was cold, but clean, and the silence outside felt different than the one inside. Less punishing, almost forgiving. I sat at the kitchen table, still warm from Janet's visit, and I took out a notebook. I hadn't written anything by hand in years, but it felt right. At the top of the page, I wrote, things I want to remember about myself. And beneath it, I used to laugh loudly in theaters. I once wrote a poem that got published in a magazine. I can make the best buttermilk pancakes in 4 states. I am not just someone's wife. I am not a leftover. I closed the notebook. My hands were shaking, but for the first time, not from grief, from something else. Something that felt suspiciously like strength. The hardest part wasn't the crying, it was the pretending. Pretending I was okay when I went to the grocery store. pretending I didn't notice when Mrs. Callahan from church whispered behind her hand in aisle 3, pretending the sympathy in people's eyes didn't feel like a spotlight I never asked for. The first Sunday I went to church alone, I almost didn't go in. I sat in the car for 15 minutes, gripping the steering wheel like it was the only thing keeping me from falling apart. But I went in, and I sat in the second pew from the back, alone. While people around me snuck glances, they thought I didn't see. And when they asked, "How are you, Beth?" with that careful tilt of the head and that soft tone like I was dying, I smiled. I'm okay, but I wasn't. Not yet. I was buying bananas, of all things. Bananas, and there she was, Claire. I recognized her from a company photo Sarah had shown me once. Back when she was proud her dad made partner at the firm. She was prettier than I expected. Younger, maybe 38. Stylish coat, sleek hair, heels at the grocery store. Who wears heels to buy milk? She looked right through me. At first, then her eyes caught mine, and I saw it, recognition, and a flicker of guilt. She took a step forward. I took one back, but she didn't stop. "Beth?" she asked, soft, nervous. I didn't answer. I'm so sorry. I never meant... Don't. I cut her off. She froze. "Whatever you think you need to say, don't," I said, forcing my voice to stay calm. "Steady. It won't make it better. It won't undo anything." Her eyes welled up. Like she was the victim. Like she was the one whose family got shattered. "You don't understand," she whispered. I looked her dead in the eye. "You're right. I don't understand how someone chooses a man they know belongs to someone else and sleeps just fine at night." Her face flushed. She opened her mouth to speak again, but I turned and walked away. And for the first time since Tom left, I didn't cry. Not in the car. Not when I got home, because walking away from her didn't feel like loss. It felt like reclaiming something. A few days later, I got a text from Sarah. "Mom, proud of you for going to church. Call me when you feel like talking more. No pressure." She didn't ask questions. She didn't press. She waited. And so one night I called her. We talked for an hour. I told her about Claire in the grocery store, about how I wanted to scream, about how I didn't. She listened. Then she said, "You're stronger than you think, Mom." And for once, I believed her. That week, I got a letter, not an email, a real letter. In Tom's handwriting, it was short. "Beth, I don't know if I deserve to say this, but I'm sorry. For all of it. For how I left. For what I took from you. You didn't do anything wrong. You were everything I needed. I just forgot how to see it. I hope one day you can forgive me." Tom, I read it twice, then 3 times. But I didn't cry. Because what hurt more than what he did was knowing he didn't even fight for us. He just walked away. He chose easier. That weekend, I pulled out a box from the attic. Inside were old journals, a few dried rose petals from our anniversary trips, and a folder of my short stories from before the kids, before the routines, before life got too busy to dream. One of them was titled "The Woman Who Stayed." It was about a woman whose husband left her. Funny, right? I wrote it when I was there with no idea life would mimic fiction. I reread it, and something inside me stirred. That night, I opened my laptop. I created a new document. I typed Chapter 1, and I wrote, "Not for him, not for Sarah, not for anyone else, for me." Janet invited me out to a small poetry reading at the local library. I said yes. I wore my favorite blue sweater, the one I hadn't touched since the Christmas before last. At the event, a woman read a poem about rebuilding after loss. Her voice cracked halfway through. My eyes filled, but I didn't look away. Afterward, she sat beside me. "First time here?" she asked. "Yeah." She smiled. "Me too. Divorced last year? Thought I'd never feel anything again." I nodded. "It comes back," I said. "Not all at once, but it does." We exchanged numbers. It wasn't earth-shattering, but it was something. One evening, I lit a fire, curled up with Penny on the couch, tea in hand, notebook in my lap. I wrote, "Today, I didn't cry. Today, I laughed once. Today, I remembered I am still here. And I matter." The clock ticked gently on the wall. Outside, the wind rustled the trees. And inside, for the first time in a long while, I felt safe. Not because someone held me, but because I was learning to hold myself. It happened on a Tuesday, the kind of Tuesday that felt like any other. Quiet, cloudy, with the scent of autumn leaves hanging in the air. Penny had just settled on the rug near the fireplace when I heard the doorbell. I wasn't expecting anyone. When I opened the door, my breath caught. It was Tom. Older, somehow. Not just in his face, but in his posture. He stood like someone carrying invisible weight. "Hey," he said. No big speech, just, "Hey." "You shouldn't be here," I said, my voice a whisper even I barely recognized. He nodded slowly. "I know, but I needed to say this in person, not in a letter." I didn't move. I didn't invite him in. I wasn't angry, but I wasn't ready to offer comfort either. 5 minutes, he asked. "That's all I need." I hesitated, then stepped aside. He sat on the edge of the couch, hands clasped together like he was praying. "I've made a mess," he began. "Claire and we're over." I didn't flinch. She wanted something I couldn't give her. I think part of me was just trying to feel alive again, and in the process, I destroyed everything real in my life. He looked at me then, and there it was. The plea I'd once waited to see in his eyes. Regret, sadness, maybe even love. "Beth, I don't expect anything. I just want you to know. Leaving you was the worst mistake of my life." My heart didn't leap. It ached. Not because I wanted him back, but because this moment should have come when it still mattered. Before everything broke. Before I had to learn how to rebuild without him. I sat across from him. Calm. Stronger than I ever expected to be. "Tom," I said gently, "you didn't just leave a marriage. You left the version of me that still needed you." He blinked, unsure what to say. "I grieved us," I continued, "and then I let go. Not because I stopped loving you, but because I finally started loving myself more." He looked down. "I understand," he whispered. "You're not the same woman anymore." I smiled softly. "No, and I'm proud of that." We didn't argue. There were no tears. He stood to leave, and before he walked out the door, he turned one last time. "You were the best thing that ever happened to me." I nodded. "I know." And then he was gone. Just like that. But this time, I wasn't the one left broken. 3 weeks later, I stood in a small community center, holding a microphone with shaking hands. It was an open mic night for local writers. And somehow, I signed up. "Hi," I said into the mic. "I'm Beth, and this is something I wrote after forgetting and then remembering who I really am." I read a short story about a woman whose life shattered and who found beauty in the cracks. When I finished, the room was silent for a beat, then applause, not thunderous, but warm, real. Sarah was there in the back row, smiling through tears. After the reading, she hugged me tighter than she had in years. "You amaze me, Mom," she said. These days, I keep a journal. Not the kind where I write what I had for breakfast, or what errands I ran, but letters. To the woman I used to be, to the woman I'm becoming, to the version of me who still sometimes wakes up missing what used to be. Because healing isn't linear. Some days I still ache. But now, I know I can survive the ache. I even know how to grow from it. I saw Claire again at the farmer's market. She looked tired, worn, not glamorous anymore. She met my eyes. I nodded once. No bitterness, no words, just peace. And I walked on. I don't believe in fairy tale endings anymore, but I do believe in soft mornings with coffee and quiet. I believe in laughter with friends, in stories that unfold slowly, in the strength that comes from walking through fire and still having the courage to love again, and maybe, just maybe, I'll fall in love again someday, but this time with someone who sees me, not as an accessory to his life, but as the whole damn story. If you've ever been left, forgotten, or made to feel like your best years are behind you, I hope this story reminds you it's never too late to come home to yourself. Sometimes the most powerful kind of love is the one we give back to ourselves. Beth's story is a reminder that even after deep betrayal and heartbreak, we all have the strength to rebuild on our own terms. Healing doesn't mean forgetting. It means growing into someone who can carry the pain and still move forward with grace. So if you're going through something similar, know this: you are not alone, and your story isn't over yet. Thank you for listening to True Story Chapters. If this story touched your heart, don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit the bell icon so you never miss another real-life story that matters. We share true voices, real struggles, and powerful moments every week, because your story could be the one that helps someone else heal too.